Hello, I'm Mark Staples. I'm the moderator for a continuing series of interviews with legislative candidates for the upcoming Montana legislature starting in January 2009. It's presented to you by Bresnan Communications, the Montana Cable Telecommunications Association, and your homegrown local MCAT local access channel. And we want to thank all of those. I also want to thank my guests today from House District 94, the opponents for that, the Democratic nominee, Dave McAlpin, here on my left, and the Republican nominee, Linda Fry. And Linda, I'm going to start with you to give our viewers and your would-be constituents some of your background.
I'm Linda Fry, and I'm a professor of history at the University of Montana for 37 years, except for 2.5 years which I spent at the United States Military Academy at West Point. My specialty is the development of international law, especially within the European state system, and I have 4 degrees, BA, BS, MA, and PhD from The Ohio State University.
Dave?
I'm actually a farm boy from Polson, Montana, raising my 5th generation of Montanans here in Missoula, my 2 children. I've worked a lot in community organizing, particularly in public health arenas, to reduce the use of tobacco. Presently, I've run for the last 3 years a small nonprofit called CASA, Court Appointed Special Advocates. We advocate for abused and neglected kids in the 4th Judicial District.
One would have to be under a rock lately not to know that the country is in great financial turmoil. It seems to be that we had energy turmoil a month ago, but that's been taken away and replaced now by a financial meltdown. Meanwhile, I read in the paper today, as maybe you both did, that Montana seems to have been floating above the surface of this for the most part, and the prognosis, at least from the experts, is pretty fair. If you agree with that, as a legislature going into the session in January, what do you attribute Montana's stability to in the face of this national meltdown, and how can we sustain it or even improve our economy? So the general question is, what's the state of Montana's economy? Do we need to improve it? Do we need to just sustain it? And where do we go from here? And I'll start with you, Linda.
Well, I feel very strongly that we need to improve the state of Montana's economy because our average wages now are 49th out of 50. I also think that we need to improve the business-friendly climate in Montana because Montana is ranked 44th in the nation, again out of 50, and Idaho is 6th. We need to create a climate where our young people can stay at home, and that currently is not the case. 75 out of 100 bachelors leave the state. We are dead last as far as wage differential with a decree. With that difference in wages, it does not encourage young people to stay at home, nor does it encourage them to get a good education, which they need to be competitive in a global market pace. So yes, I think we do need to improve the Montana economy. I think we've been lucky to have been insulated as much as we have, but I think with these continuing layoffs throughout the state, we have to be more aggressive about improving the economy of Montana.
Dave?
I think that in general, our economy has been very stable and actually is improved. Studies I've seen show that Montana has actually risen in the rankings more quickly than any other state in job growth. So I think we're on the right track. Certainly we're going to be affected by the economic downturn. This is going to be, the 2009 session will be a belt-tightening session. We shouldn't expect big improvements or big expansions of government programs. But I think with some reasonable leadership, we can continue with present government services, and we would not have to raise taxes or reduce services. That would be my goal.
With continuing on the subject of the economy, there was, as of yesterday, and it could change, a $300 million surplus in the state's general fund. Assuming we can sustain that, and who knows, with the gas prices now falling, oil prices now falling, which are part of that formula, if we go into this session with a sizable surplus, do you have any priorities for the use of the surplus? Do we hold on to it, reinvest it in particular enterprises or social programs? give it back? Any thoughts on the use of a surplus, if indeed we're fortunate enough to have one, Dave?
Well, I think that the best projections I've seen as of late are $300 to $400 million surplus. But from that, you have to reduce the cost of fighting fires. You have to reduce present law adjustments, which are the inflation of the cost of government. And last session, that was several $100 million. So effectively, I expect we'll be left with maybe $100 to $200 million at most. I don't think we should, with that sort of a number, with the uncertainty of the economy we see now, corporate tax revenues are down, oil production is down, capital gains will obviously be down with this downturn in the stock market. I think we need to proceed with caution and to probably go into the session with status quo, no tax increase approach.
Linda?
Well, I couldn't agree more with the no tax increase approach. I think he's right with the present law adjustments as they've been factored into the economy. This would be a very dangerous move, especially given probably the fall in corporate income taxes, the fall in income taxes generally. So I think we should be extremely cautious. I guess perhaps the only thing that I would think that we might invest a small amount of it in, and that would be the development of certain kind of technological research at the university. And I would advocate that because that could be a motor of growth within the economy as a whole.
With regards to investments and sort of a sideline to higher education, which is what the euphemism for college education, we have a roiling continuing argument in Montana over the adequacy of school funding, particularly kindergarten through the 12th grade. And in the last two sessions, new monies have been put into education, but there are certainly a substantial number of people in the education field who feel that they were not adequate and feel strongly enough about it that they've filed a lawsuit complaining in their plaintiff's brief that we have not spent enough. And as a matter of fact, the number that has been said either formally or informally that would be needed to adequately fund schools in their mind is $600 million more a year. What is your take on what the adequacy of funding for schools in Montana, and if it is inadequate either by court order or legislative consensus, where will we get the money to upgrade those expenditures?
Okay, well, I think if you figured out the per pupil spending in Montana, it would be approximately $9,400, which would place us fairly high in the nation. But the spending on teacher salaries is 46th. We desperately need to change that, and I think we need to get more money down into the classrooms. I think we ought to look very seriously at the administrative costs of education, which, depending on which statistical formula you use, are either 9th in the nation, which is too high, or 15th in the nation, which again is too high. I also think that we could look at the district levels and the administrative overstructure to try to cut that down. I'm not sure why the administrative overstructure has continued to increase when the enrollment throughout the state has plummeted. We should see why that is the case. As for funding of schools, I would favor a shift away from the property tax base, which I think makes it too unstable, and a shift, if possible, to the general fund. And I know that there was a bill proposed the last time which did suggest that.
Dave?
I think the short answer to the question is we've done a lot, but we need to do more. Clearly, if we had done enough, we wouldn't be back in court with the trial that started recently. Best estimates that I've seen is in the 2 sessions I've served in the legislature, we've increased state share of funding to local schools 27 to 32%. And understand here that we're trying to rebuild budget cuts that have occurred over 2 decades. So we're not going to be able to do that quickly or within just a few years. I'm very proud of the increase that we've sent to local schools, but I think we need to do more. I would focus the more that we do in the upcoming session on 2 areas. On the quality educator component, which puts dollars right in the classroom and helps us get and keep the best teachers. When I graduated high school in '83 in Polson, our teachers were middle of the pack in the nation. And as Linda mentioned, we're now down at the very bottom of the pack. We're not going to be able to maintain our quality unless we can recruit, retain, and work with really good quality teachers by having good competitive salaries. The other area I would invest in is helping schools get better energy efficiency in their buildings, which now have gotten to be fairly inefficient. That way we can reduce global warming and we can reduce our dependence on foreign oil.
The subject of taxes inevitably comes up. I believe, Dave, you said that in the current economic situation, I thought I heard you say that you would not favor new taxes. I will ask that question again just to get the emphasis. But if we need to, if this lawsuit is lost, and we need to come up with taxes, I mean, who do we shift these costs to? If we shift to the state from the taxpayer, it's still the taxpayer. It's just not. It's just income tax instead of property tax. So, and I specifically, one of the things is that the cities are lamenting that they have not shared in the state's good years. They don't believe, and that they're having a terrible time meeting both their financial obligations, their infrastructure obligations, and their service obligations. And they are proposing to take to the legislature a bill that would allow them to, in turn, take to the voters of their communities what's called local option taxing authority. Traditionally, those taxes focus on alcohol by the drink, prepared meals, and lodging, and maybe any recreational facilities offered in that community. That has been limited to communities that are designated by fairly strict criteria as resort communities. The new proposal is to give every community the opportunity to take that to their voters and have essentially a local option sales tax. Linda, would you favor that proposal?
No, I would not favor a local option sales tax because I think right now that.
By the vote of the people.
But no, I think. Oh, you mean introducing it? I think, okay, if people voted it in, yes, then the people's will should obviously rule. But I think that a local option sales tax should be looked at very, very seriously, because at least according to the Bureau at the business school, those sales taxes still tend to reside or still fall most heavily on residents. So that would mean, in some cases, any kind of restaurant meal, any kind of service tickets, as Dave proposed it the last time. It could fall on Mother's Day flowers. It could fall on babysitting. It could fall on all of those kinds of things, which would just be another tax on our community. And I'm a little opposed to sales taxes because I can't see how they would not become necessarily regressive. I would like to see the city government take a much stronger look at the budget that was put forward. I am disturbed that the city government put forward a tax increase when wages are not keeping up with that. I think we should have looked at it and cut the budget just as many of the county governments did around us. I understand the need for it, but it would have to be very, very, very carefully crafted, I think, for the people of Missoula to accept that.
Dave?
This is a tough question. Tax fairness is one of the biggest challenges that we face when we go to this session. We have to look at Missoula, we have to look at the entire state and try and do the right thing. In my opinion, I was the sponsor of the local option sales tax for the state in the 2007, because I see the cities as the primary economic drivers in the Montana economy. The bigger cities like Missoula are the places that jobs are actually being created, and I believe the mayor of Missoula and other cities when they tell me that they are not able to keep up with the growth that they can provide through jobs with their infrastructure. And I think we need to help them do that. Why would we kill the goose that's laying the golden egg in our economy? And you can't have it both ways. You can't have increased services and demand for growth without providing the infrastructure that goes with that. And that is why I sponsored the local option sales tax that was not successful in the last session, but I believe it could be successful. The caveat I would always put on that is that it must be passed by a vote of the local people.
Well, thank you both for your thoughtful answers to my overarching questions about economic conditions in Montana. I know you probably each have specific passions of your own legislatively that you'd like to support defend against or bring yourself if you're elected. So I would start with you, Linda, and give you an opportunity to close, make your pitch for ultimately they check your box instead of Dave's, and say specifically what it is that you'd like to take to Missoula, if anything, in terms of specific agenda.
Well, one of my specific agenda would be funding scientific research at the university, because I think that we could be another Ireland if we played our cards right. We could be another North Carolina Triangle if we put more money into science and research, and that has a kind of synergetic effect throughout the entire community. I would favor money to education, but I would favor K through 12 looking at the formula and how it's been allocated. I would also specifically like to make it illegal for cities or county governments to force property owners to sign waivers of their rights. When we were fighting the SID on Hillview Way, I discovered that a number of the citizens in that district did not legally have the right to protest taxes or sewer districts or anything, and as far as I'm concerned, that's a significant violation of the Constitution. So those are my main issues, and I would appreciate your support.
Dave, you get the last word.
Thanks. My priorities in the legislature for the last 3 terms have been much more basic. I think we need to get children health care. I think we need to adequately fund our schools so that our kids can be competitive in a world market. And I think we need to create jobs by providing training dollars to bring jobs like DirecTV here to Missoula with good paying jobs and benefits. And I've proven myself in the legislature. In the last session, I was elected minority whip of the House. And we had a very divided session where our caucus stood up for those values I just described. And I would like to continue to provide that leadership in Helena in the 2009 session.
Well, again, thank you both for taking the time. It's a working day when we're taping this, midday. It's not the lunch hour, and you're both here taking time away from your own professions and your own. But you know, this is just a hint of what's to come if you actually win, when you take 4 months at the least to go to Helena, and then interim committees, and you get to work 12, 16-hour days, 6 days a week, and on the 7th day you don't rest. That's when you answer your constituents' complaints and mail. So I, on behalf of Bresnan and on behalf of the Montana Cable Telecommunications Association, myself, and I think most of your would-be constituents, thank you very much for taking the time to run. Thank you for taking the time to serve if you're elected. And now the least we can do, myself and the viewing audience, is take the time to vote in November. And thank you very much for watching.